This is the 5th day of this October 1981 7-day sesshin. And today we will read from and comment on the first koan in the Blue Cliff record. It's a translation of the Zen classic by Thomas and J.C. Cleary. The first case, these are called cases, being entitled here, The Highest Meaning of the Holy Truths. And it's about Bodhidharma and his encounter with Emperor Wu. Let us first read the case. Emperor Wu of Liang asked the great master Bodhidharma. Incidentally, he is supposed to have traveled from India to China in the 6th century AD, so approximately 1,000 years after the death of the Buddha. Supposed to have been the 3rd son of a king in southern India, and then studied Buddhism in a very old age. Some say he was over 100. He made a sea voyage to China. The emperor had heard of the arrival of this Indian monk and he asked for an audience. The Emperor Wu of Liang asked the great master Bodhidharma, "What is the highest meaning of the holy truths?" And Bodhidharma said, "Empty, without holiness." In another translation it says, "Vast emptiness, with nothing that can be called holy." The emperor said, "Who is facing me?" And Bodhidharma replied, "I don't know." The emperor did not understand. After this, Bodhidharma crossed the Yangtze River and came to the kingdom of Wei. That's where he then found this cave, which is today's upward of Shaolin Monastery. Yes, it's a 2-hour climb there. We'll probably read about it in the next Zenbo. Because Roshi and the group of people who went to China did climb up to that cave. The cave itself apparently being no tourist attraction. The monastery is, but not the cave. Later, the emperor brought this up to Master Chi. There's no footnote here. This Master Chi was somebody around that emperor. Supposed to have been an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of compassion. Later the emperor brought this up to Master Chi and asked him about it. Master Chi said, "Does your majesty know who this man is?" And the emperor said, "I don't know." Master Chi said, "He is the Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, transmitting the Buddha seal." The emperor felt regretful. So he wanted to send an emissary to invite Bodhidharma to return. Master Chi told him, "Your Majesty, don't say that you will send someone to fetch him back. Even if everyone in the whole country were to go after him, he still wouldn't return." That's the case as it is stated here in the Hekigan-roku. Incidentally, Hekigan-roku was collected by a Chinese monk, Zen master Zeidao, who lived 980 to 1052. Then it was published and commented. This teacher wrote some commentary and some verses to these cases that he collected. Cases mostly being mondo, dialogues between monks and monks, monks and masters, masters and masters, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 together. Often comments about comments. So this was published, this collection made earlier, a couple hundred years earlier, was published by Yuan Wu in 1128, and interestingly enough, his direct Dharma heir and disciple Dawi, from whom we've often read letters, burned all the manuscripts because he felt and probably had witnessed how much mere mouthing was going on of these cases and answers. He wanted to avoid this. Of course, he couldn't. It was recollected. The cases were recollected. So we don't really know what the original was like. It was probably approximated, or maybe some people remembered. The present edition is of 1300. About Bodhidharma coming from the West, how it's always called, the foreigner or the broken-toothed foreigner or the bearded barbarian. To the Chinese, an Indian with a beard was something very strange, to say the least, because supposedly Chinese have no beards, very little body hair. The incident of the broken teeth maybe we'll get to tomorrow if we read another koan about Bodhidharma and his first successor, who was the one who earlier, in meeting with Bodhidharma, knocked out his teeth. Maybe you've never heard that. I hadn't heard it either before I read it someplace. Since we already mentioned it, let's tell it. This Eka, who later became his one and only disciple successor, was a learned scholar in Buddhist sutras, and it is said that when he recited the sutras and interpreted them, petals of flowers rained from the sky, lotuses and so forth. And only those who had come to this stage and that stage and penetrated this stage too could see those flowers. And Bodhidharma was present at one of those lectures. And he asked Eka is a Japanese name, I don't remember his Chinese name, "What are you doing there?" And he said, "I'm reading the Buddha's sutras." And Bodhidharma said, "What for?" And Eka said, "Well, it is to teach people to go beyond life and death." And Bodhidharma said, "The sutras are in black ink on white paper. How does that teach people to go beyond birth and death?" At which it is stated the Dharma master became angry. And he was carrying beads made out of metal, which whenever he was angry, he swung around. all this incidentally comes from a commentary from the Dharma master, the Golden Temple out in the West. I forget his name. And he has commented, and the book is published, on the Six Patriarchs Sutra. And in there he writes about this. So, Dharma master, whatever his name, swung his beads and hit Bodhidharma in the mouth and knocked out some teeth. It is also stated there that legend has it that if teeth of a saint fall to the ground, there won't be any rain for a long time. There'll be a drought. Bodhidharma apparently knew this, and he said, I came to this country not to bring a drought. So he swallowed them. And he left. And this Dharma master followed him and followed him and followed him. We'll come to that tomorrow, maybe. There's a book called Like a Dream, Like a Fantasy, and it's the Zen writings and translations of Nyogen Sensaki. He is a Zen monk who came to this country in 1905. Supposedly the first Zen monk to come here and teach. The Dharma brother to D.T. Suzuki. He wrote quite a number of poems on Bodhidharma. He was sent by his teacher to this land to teach Buddhism, and one has the feeling in reading some of these poems that there was always some nostalgia for home. Very slight. He felt like a foreigner in a strange land in America on the West Coast. Was also interned being a Japanese. He had already had a strange childhood. He had a Siberian father and a Japanese mother, and a Buddhist monk found the baby next to the frozen mother, and then turned the baby over to some Japanese carpenter or shipbuilder. In the introduction by Eido Shimano, it says, he writes a few reasons for Nyogen Sensaki coming to this country. It says here, a second reason for his coming to America was his disappointment with Japanese Buddhism and Zen as they were being practiced during his lifetime. Throughout his writings are found comments about the lack of sincerity of many monks and priests. He also abhorred the existence of a rigid institutional system, a system which to his mind at least had come to scar the original purity of the Buddha's teaching. Perhaps he felt that in America he would be free to teach and practice pure and simple Zen, with no hindrance from established norms and traditional formalities. It says in 1922, after doing all kinds of odd jobs, he worked in a hotel as a dishwasher, as a manager for a canary show. During his free time, he learned English. And so I've heard became very skillful at social dancing. Nobody really knows how and why, but finally Nyogen Sensaki decided to begin to teach Zen Buddhism. It says in 22, he began renting halls and giving lectures. In 25, he opened an apartment zendo on Bush Street in San Francisco. His Sangha seems to have been rather active, as Nyogen Sensaki even ordained 2 young Americans. Again, for reasons as yet undiscovered, Nyogen Sensaki decided to move to Los Angeles, and he opened the Zendo there, calling it Eastward Hall. Owing to the newness of Zen for all his students, he also referred to his Zendo as a mentor garden, the same name he had used for his kindergarten in Japan. He taught kindergarten. It's just a few items about this Nyogen Sensaki, who wrote several fine poems on Bodhidharma. This broken-toothed, bearded barbarian from the West. Some old papers were recently excavated from the ruins of an ancient city in eastern Turkestan. The scholars say that they contain the thought of Bodhidharma. And they've been busy turning out commentaries, both in the horizontal writing of the West and in the vertical lines of the Orient. Who knows exactly the thought of the blue-eyed monk? Some imitate his zazen and gaze at the wall until the sun goes down. Hey, you're all wrong. This was written October 37, and then October 46. Evening clouds have vanished, leaving the dark forest of cypress. There is no road to the temple of Bodhidharma. A brook runs through the fallen leaves. The wild underbrush of autumn hides it here and there. What was the teaching of the blue-eyed monk? Look! The steep rocky cliffs have gazed at each other for 1,400 years, keeping the untransmittable Dharma by themselves. Before Bodhidharma came to China from India, the rugged mountains of Wei were established in the meditation pose. What a beautiful thing to say. Before Bodhidharma came to China from India, the rugged mountains of Wei were established in the meditation pose. The legend says Bodhidharma returned to India carrying one shoe in his hand. Coming and going have nothing to do with his Zen. Is not this chrysanthemum a lingering scent of our Master's robe? Has one the eyes and ears to smell it? October 49. My friends, do you say you couldn't sleep last night? The heat of this late summer bothered you. You could not find any cooler place. Why did Bodhidharma come from China? the question I know also bothered you. Wait until the evening sun colors the mountains with its gentle ray. And this is the last one, October 53. It's entitled Bodhidharma. The thready limbs of the weeping willow play with a spring breeze. They almost touch my sleeve when I promenade in the soft air with Bodhidharma. The sunset glow of a summer day tinges my window while I watch the colorful clouds in the western sky and listen to the whisper of Bodhidharma, a message from eternity. The agitated wind of autumn scatters the fallen leaves in the garden, and the noise wakes me up at midnight. The light still remains burning, and I thought I spoke to Bodhidharma. Nay, it was my own shadow. In a winter day, children play with the remaining snow. They make the blue-eyed snowman, Bodhidharma. But it would not last long. It will melt soon, reducing itself to nothingness. Let us quickly read some of the commentary here of Sedao. From afar, Bodhidharma saw that this country, China, had people capable of the great vehicle, so he came by sea intent on his mission, purely to transmit the mind seal. It's another word for that which cannot be named. To arouse and instruct those mired in delusion. Without establishing written words, he pointed directly to the human mind to see nature and fulfill Buddhahood. Nature here meaning seeing the truth. Seeing. The seeing being the fulfilling of Buddhahood. Seeing with which comes compassion and right action. If you can see this way, then you will have your share of freedom. Never again will you be turned around by pursuing words, and everything will be completely revealed. Let us say from moment to moment. Because there's always something new that life throws up. Thereafter you will be able to converse with Emperor Wu, and you will naturally be able to see how the second patriarch's mind was pacified. That's the other koan. We will go into another time. Without the mental defilements of judgment and comparison, everything is cut off, and you're free and at ease. What need is there to go on distinguishing right and wrong? which never means, please not to misunderstand, to act wantonly. Acting wantonly does not come out of clear seeing, it comes out of partiality to one's own likes and dislikes. It's referring to this limited right and wrong, which is culturally, socially, religiously, etc., conditioned. Varying from time to time, from society to society, from culture to culture, and within each society and culture, for subcultures, etc. What need is there to go on distinguishing right and wrong, or discriminating gain and loss? And how many still distinguish gain from loss? Success and failure. I gotta succeed in this, or else I'm going to be again another failure like all my life. What does this have to do with sitting in Zazen? I don't understand. Even so, Sayadaw continues, how many people are capable of this? Emperor Wu had put on monk's robes. Never had known this. The emperor had put on monk's robes. He was called the Buddhist Emperor of China. And personally expounded the light-emitting wisdom scripture. He experienced heavenly flowers. Oh, he too. Didn't read all this. Heavenly flowers falling in profusion, and the earth turning to gold. It's age-old, this thing of visions. Visions of holiness. Halos. Halo, the word also comes from holy. This past summer we had occasion to hear some exquisite concerts in a little chapel in Switzerland. We were surrounded by frescoes, ancient frescoes. Some of them you could hardly see anymore. And you know, first the word fresco, and there's a feeling must be something terrific there. And then you looked closer, and you know what you saw? People with swords chopping off other people's heads. There was a profusion of heads with halos around, scattered on the ground, practically in every single fresco. And here and there a Swiss cross. Or maybe the cross of a crusader, or goodness knows what. And there are these trunks of human beings with no head. The music was exquisite. He studied the path, and humbly served the Buddha, issuing orders throughout his realm to build temples and ordain monks, and practicing in accordance with the teaching. People called him the Buddha Heart Emperor. When Bodhidharma first met Emperor Wu, the emperor asked, "I have built temples and ordained monks. What merit is there in this?" And Bodhidharma said, "There is no merit." He immediately doused the emperor with dirty water. If you can penetrate this statement, there is no merit, then you can meet Bodhidharma personally. Now tell me, why is there no merit at all in building temples and ordaining monks? Where does the meaning of this lie? The Emperor Wu held discussions with Dharma Master Lu Ye and Mahasattva Fu, and with the Prince Chao Ming about the two truths, the real and the conventional truth. As it says in the teachings, by the real truth we understand that it is not existent. By the conventional truth we understand that it is not non-existent. That the real truth and the conventional truth are not two is the highest meaning of the holy truths. This is the most esoteric, most abstruse point of the doctrinal schools. And obviously remains abstruse and esoteric. Unless, as is always said in this book, one cuts through the vines, chops down the roots and sees directly. What the hell are they talking about? Hence, the emperor picked out this ultimate paradigm, I know how you pronounce that, to ask Bodhidharma, what is the highest meaning of the holy truths? And Bodhidharma answered, empty, without holiness. Sayadaw comments, no monk in the world can leap clear of this. Bodhidharma gives them a single sword blow that cuts off everything. These days, how people misunderstand. They go on giving play to their spirits, put a glare in their eyes and say, empty without holiness. Fortunately, this has nothing to do with it. Holiness reminds one inevitably, when one sits and looks at this word, of the holy wars. It can remind one of other things, the holiest of holy, the inner sanctuary of a church. Let's talk about that first, remembering as a child, when you travel in Europe, you always go into the churches because they're magnificent structures and tremendously adorned. Mostly the Catholic cathedrals. It's an incredible thing for a little child to stand in one of those churches with these sweeping arches, the light filtering through stained glass, and that smell of incense, the candles, and all these holy images everywhere. Saints, virgins, Christ on the cross, gods, everything. And then devoted people kneeling. One wished one belonged and could kneel a little bit in a pew too. And do this. I did that once. Cross yourself. Felt terrific. It really did. It's quite a gesture. And yet there was always this red cordon, that red thing, and you couldn't go past that. There was this tremendous thing coming here the first time on a Friday evening for an introductory talk, Buckingham Street. after the talk, you could all go into this holiest of holies, so it seemed, because there was incense. And there were figures, beautiful swaying canoe on a shelf. And you could sit there. You weren't excluded. It was your incense too. Before it wasn't your incense, it was somebody else's. Now you could burn it even at home. Studying history in Germany, an important part in history are the holy wars. I don't know whether you study the Crusades here in your American history. I don't mean in American history. At that time, the Americans didn't crusade. And you know, again, a child's imagination captured by these ritters, these knights in white. They were always white. And the Turks or whatever they were dark. A lot of head chopping going on too. Poems about it which we had to recite by heart. To save the Holy Land. To save the Holy Land, which had been taken by the infidels. Whoever, that was a horrible word. The infidels. Didn't know what it meant, but it was clear. They were dark and grim looking. And you know, it defies description. It brings tears to the eyes if one thinks of it. There was a crusade made up of children to go there once. A children's crusade. 90% of the children perished. To save the Holy Land. You know, it is not saved today. It is war and terror and hatred and division ridden. All religious factions fighting each other. Of course, it's not just religion underneath, there's territorialism. You name it, and untold grief of people thrown out, thrown in. Wars among religious groups continues. Recently in a bulletin called Blind Donkey, which comes from the Diamond Sangha in Hawaii, we read an article by this Yamada Roshi that President Sadat has invited religious leaders from the 3 leading religions, meaning Christianity there and Islam and what would the other one be? Judaism, to come together and talk and see if this cannot be resolved. And yesterday I heard that President Sadat was assassinated. Dead. Can one bring religions together? Within each religion, there are hundreds of factions which are at odds with each other. Has the United Nations brought the nations to unity? What is the ending of division? Can we try to bring all the parts together? Will the parts ever relinquish their identity? Not as long as this identity is clutched for fear of being nobody. And this is where the work has to be done. It is absolutely vital work for each individual human being, regardless of religion or name. Is it possible to see into the oneness of all things, of all life, of all humanity? Isn't that the only crucial question? Not promoting this or promoting that. Isn't all promoting ultimately a promoting of division? How can this work go on without creating new division? Is it possible? It must be possible. Of course it's possible. If one needs to do it, anything a human being needs to do, he or she can do. If the doer is understood and seen through and dropped, sometimes people say toward the evening, I don't really know what I'm here for. It sort of eludes me after a while. It's quite natural, it happens. But does one need to look very far to know what needs to be done? If one sees what is going on inside and in this world, which is not separate from us, Setcho continues, my late master Wutsu once said, if only you can penetrate empty without holiness, then you can return home and sit in peace. You know, penetrating empty without holiness, in that penetration there is wholeness. And in such wholeness, there is nothing that is not holy. Setcho continues, all this amounts to creating complications. Talking about it. Still, it does not stop Bodhidharma from smashing the lacquer bucket for others. There's a frequent expression to smash the lacquer bucket. Lacquer is black, that black bucket in which we're stuck. Among all, Bodhidharma is most extraordinary, says Setcho. So it is said, if you can penetrate a single phrase, at the same moment you will penetrate 1,000 phrases, 10,000 phrases. Then naturally you can cut off and you can hold still. These are two actions which are not really two, cutting off and just holding still. The cutting off doesn't come out of stillness. It has a motive. And then just creates new complications. An ancient said, quote, crushing your bones and dismembering your body would not be sufficient requital or requital. When a single phrase is clearly understood, you leap over hundreds of millions. In other words, what good is self-mortification or self-immolation? Often people come to such incredible, grievous despair that they think the only way out is to jump into the river, finish their lives. And yet, grief and sorrow and greed and anger continue. They haven't been resolved. So wait, and look. Every human being has this capacity to see clearly. If in the beginning only at the briefest of instances, something is glimpsed that was not partial, didn't come out of partiality. And maybe this ever so brief welling up of love, in which there is no part, no partiality. No distance, no time. And as smooth as who can it be questioned without distance, without time? No one knowing, no expecting. No thing, just who om who. We will stop here for today. The 4 vows.